Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling strangely exhausted, even though nothing dramatic actually happened? No argument, no conflict, no obvious tension, and yet, something about that interaction left you mentally drained. You can't quite explain it, but you feel it clearly. It is not just tiredness. It is a kind of quiet depletion that lingers long after the conversation ends. And what makes it more confusing is that this does not happen with everyone. With some people, you can talk for hours and feel energized. With others, even a short interaction feels heavy. This difference is not random. It reveals something important about how human energy, attention, and emotional processing actually work. One of the main reasons certain people feel exhausting is the amount of mental processing required during the interaction. Conversations are not just about words. They involve interpreting tone, reading intention, predicting reactions, and adjusting responses in real time. With some individuals, this process feels natural and effortless. There is alignment in communication style, emotional rhythm, and expectation. But with others, the interaction requires constant adjustment. You may find yourself choosing words more carefully, monitoring your tone, or anticipating how something might be misunderstood. This continuous internal calculation consumes mental energy, even if the conversation appears normal on the surface. Another factor is emotional inconsistency. Some people communicate in ways that create subtle uncertainty. Their tone may shift unexpectedly. Their reactions may not align with what they say. Their responses may carry mixed signals that require interpretation. When you interact with someone like this, your brain works harder to resolve the inconsistency. It tries to make sense of what is actually happening beneath the surface. This constant interpretation creates cognitive load, which can lead to fatigue. Over time, your mind begins associating that person with effort rather than ease. There is also the issue of unspoken expectations. In some interactions, you may feel an invisible pressure to behave in a certain way. Perhaps you feel the need to be more agreeable, more entertaining, or more attentive than usual. These expectations are not always expressed directly, but they are sensed through subtle cues. When you adjust your behavior to meet these expectations, you are essentially performing rather than simply being. This performance requires energy because it is not aligned with your natural state. After the interaction ends, the contrast between performance and authenticity becomes more noticeable, and that contrast often feels like exhaustion. Emotional absorption plays another role. Some individuals express their thoughts and feelings in a way that transfers emotional weight to others. They may talk extensively about problems, frustrations, or concerns without creating space for balance. While empathy is a natural human response, absorbing too much emotional intensity without release can become draining. Your mind processes not only your own experience but also the emotional content being shared. This dual processing increases the overall load on your attention and energy. Over time, your body begins recognizing this pattern and responding with fatigue as a protective signal. Another important aspect involves conversational imbalance. In some interactions, one person dominates the exchange while the other listens, adapts, and responds. When you consistently occupy the role of listener or emotional regulator, the interaction becomes asymmetrical. You are contributing more energy than you are receiving. Even if the conversation appears friendly, this imbalance can create a subtle sense of depletion. Your mind recognizes that the exchange is not equal, and that recognition translates into fatigue. Over time, repeated exposure to this dynamic can make certain people feel exhausting even when no conflict is present. As you begin recognizing these patterns, something important starts to change in how you experience social interaction. You become more aware of the difference between interactions that energize you and those that drain you. This awareness can feel subtle at first, but over time it becomes clearer. You may notice that after spending time with certain people, your mind feels calm, focused, and open. With others, your thoughts feel scattered, heavy, or tense. This contrast is not a coincidence. It reflects how different interactions affect your cognitive and emotional systems. One of the most significant shifts that occurs at this stage is the development of internal boundaries. Instead of automatically adapting to every interaction, you begin evaluating how much energy you are willing to invest. You may still engage, but you become more selective about how deeply you participate. For example, you might limit how much emotional content you absorb, or you might choose not to respond to every subtle expectation. This selectivity reduces the overall load on your system. It allows you to remain present without becoming overwhelmed. Another transformation involves pacing. When you interact with people who create pressure or inconsistency, slowing down your responses can change the dynamic significantly. Instead of reacting immediately, you pause. This pause gives you space to process what is happening without becoming absorbed in it. It also reduces the effectiveness of conversational patterns that rely on quick emotional reactions. Over time, this slower rhythm creates a buffer between you and the interaction. You are still engaged, but you are no longer fully immersed in the energy of the other person. This distinction is important because it preserves your mental clarity. Emotional detachment also becomes more refined. This does not mean becoming cold or indifferent. It means recognizing which emotions belong to you and which do not. When someone expresses frustration, urgency, or negativity, you can acknowledge it without fully absorbing it. This skill requires practice because the natural tendency is to mirror emotional states during interaction. However, as you become more aware, you learn to maintain a degree of separation. This separation prevents your energy from being directly influenced by every emotional signal in the conversation. Over time, this reduces the feeling of exhaustion. Another important realization is that not every interaction needs to be extended. In many social environments, there is an unspoken expectation to maintain conversations longer than necessary. People may continue talking out of habit, politeness, or discomfort with silence. But when you recognize the impact certain interactions have on your energy, you begin allowing conversations to end naturally rather than extending them unnecessarily. This change can feel small, but it has a significant effect on your overall mental state. It prevents unnecessary depletion and reinforces your sense of control over your time and attention. Ultimately, the feeling of being tired around certain people is not random, and it is not something you should ignore. It is a signal. It reflects how your mind and emotional system respond to specific patterns of interaction. By paying attention to this signal, you gain valuable information about your environment and your own needs. Over time, this awareness allows you to shape your interactions more intentionally. You begin spending more time in environments that support clarity and less time in those that create unnecessary strain. And as this balance improves, you may find that social interaction becomes less about managing energy and more about experiencing connection in a way that feels natural, stable, and sustainable.